I want to bring in NBC's Gary Grumbach, who's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Greg McCrary is a former FBI profiler. Duncan Levin, a criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. Thanks to all of you for being here. So, Gary, I understand there's an extradition hearing coming up in about a half an hour or so. Get us up to speed on the latest from where you are.
Hey there, Chris. Yeah, there will be an extradition hearing here at 1:30 in Blair County, and this is expected and really is much more of a formality here. It should be a fairly quick process. Both sides could agree to an extradition, and then Mangione is off to New York to face his charges there. If there is some pushback from Mangione's attorneys, it could be a little bit of a longer, more drawn-out process, and that is where we could actually learn a little bit more about what the DA's office has found in terms of their investigation here in Blair County. But again, he could be back in New York as soon as tonight or even tomorrow. Now, this is an old-fashioned courthouse. We're talking pens and paper, so that we're not going to have any electronics inside, but we'll get the information out as soon as possible. But as it relates to motive a little bit, it's important to see what he had with him when he was arrested at that McDonald's. $8,000 in cash, including foreign currency, some writings that I know you'll get into later, and an indication that he did act alone. So that's something that the investigators will be looking at as they proceed here in the process. Chris?
So thanks so much for that, Gary. Greg, you're steeped in this kind of work, and I think a question a lot of people have is, does Mangione fit the profile of a person who would pre-plan an attack, lie in wait, and shoot someone presumably they don't know in the back, or is there no real profile?
Well, there's no real profile, but there are certain traits that we see with lone actor targeted violence, which is exactly what we have here. It's predatory in nature, and it's driven by extreme overvalued beliefs. And the beliefs are increasingly resistant to challenge or change over time and become the justification for violence. And the predatory violence is instrumental, offensive, targeted, it's planned. It's not a reaction to any imminent threat. In other words, there's no clear and present danger to the safety or security of the attacker. We see the video, Mr. Thompson just walking down the street when he's gunned down from behind. Now, almost always these things are motivated by some sort of grievance. And to me, it looks at this point that it may be more, that Mr. Thompson may be more of a symbolic victim than than a personal victim. I mean, certainly he didn't, Mr. Thompson didn't deny any coverage personally, if that may be some kind of personal motivation. But so we see this shaping up. They identify with anti-heroes, these attackers do, who take up weapons against oppressors. And this idea that you see him kind of aligning with Ted Kaczynski in this case, describing him as an extreme political revolutionary. No, Kaczynski's a murderer. He murdered 3 people, wounded 23 others. But we see this. We think of Timothy McVeigh, who bombed the federal building in Oklahoma. He wore a T-shirt that said, "Sick-tempered tyrannus, thus always to tyrants." They see themselves as this sort of avenging guy who is taking up weapons against an oppressor. And it requires a moral inversion where bad becomes good and right becomes wrong. But they're not crazy. That's the other thing we have to understand, that they're not delusional. He's not delusional. He knew what he was doing was wrong, and I don't think an insanity defense is going to hold up. And we look at that, just the way he carried out the crime. Checked into a hostel with a fake ID, paid cash, conducted pre-attack surveillance, laid in wait, concealed his identity with a hoodie and mask, and he fled the scene and eluded capture for days. All of that indicates he knew what he was doing was wrong.
Yeah, he obviously was smart, at least if you read some of the interviews, Duncan, that have been done with friends of his across his life. They said he was incredibly smart, obviously, high school valedictorian, graduates with both a bachelor's and a master's degree from an Ivy League school. We also learned from his profile on social media that he's a big reader. I mentioned he praised the Unabomber manifesto, but he also posted about a lot of stuff, from dieting to Elon Musk, artificial intelligence to cellular agriculture. So I wonder, if you're building a case here, what stands out to you? What is most legally relevant? Because we're learning an awful lot about this guy in the first 24 hours since he was spotted at the McDonald's.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, look, the evidence so far from what we can tell, just even in the public reporting, is pretty overwhelming. He was caught. He matches the description and the video of the man who committed the offense. He's caught with this ghost gun and a suppressor. He gives fake ID to the police officers, the same fake ID that was used to check into the hostel in Upper Manhattan. There's so much here for prosecutors to use, not the least of which is this manifesto, which gives motive. And the prosecutors don't have to prove motive at all, but to have it is obviously helpful. So I think what people are going to be looking at both on the defense side and the prosecution side is what the charge is. And right now we know it to be murder two, which is a intentional killing. In New York, that's basically the highest murder there is, except for murder in the first degree, which carries with it very special circumstances. Such as hate killings. Here, the only way to bump it up to a murder one would be if they could show that it was somehow related to terrorism, and they could ultimately make some kind of argument that this manifesto and the writings on the shell casings that they found at the scene of the crime were meant to, intimidate and coerce policy changes in the health insurance industry, and as such, it was terrorism. But it looks right now like they're charging it as a murder in the second degree. So what I think everyone's going to be looking at is what the evidence is that supports that versus what the defense might ultimately try to do, which is get this knocked down a peg down to manslaughter in the first degree, because what we know is that he had a very serious spinal injury and had pain, and it may very well be, and again, we're making up facts, but it very well may be that he was taking some kind of psychiatric medication for it, or medication that he'll be able to argue led to what's called a mental disease or defect under a New York psychiatric defense. Not that he's not guilty by reason of insanity, because I agree that would be a very, very high bar here, but it might be enough to knock it down a peg to manslaughter in the first degree, which might carry less of a harsh sentence for him. So I think that's the kind of thing that everyone's going to be looking at now as they build their case, because from what we can tell so far, the evidence here is extremely strong against him. So it's really just going to be what the ultimate charges and/or conviction might be.